Do you believe a guy just yelling on a stage can make a suicidal person instantly decide to turn their life around and start a business?
Starts now. I'm Joe.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Whatever time zone you are in right now, welcome to Sip and Talk. I'm Sunny, and sitting right across from me, listening to the clink of our glasses being filled, is the calm brain who is constantly pumping the brakes on my sheer excitement.
Oh, and welcome to all the Sip and Talkers out there.
Yeah.
It's great to be back. And to address that rather wild opening question, I have to give a bit of a laugh here, because calling it just yelling is a fundamental misunderstanding of the mechanics at play.
Okay, fair enough.
Right. We are not looking at a standard motivational speaker here. We're looking at a 6'7" human systems engineer.
A human systems engineer. I mean, I really like that framing.
It is the only framing that really makes sense of the facts.
Yeah.
We are talking about a man with hands the size of watermelons who has been brought in to counsel 3 U.S. presidents, including Clinton.
Which is wild.
It is. He has worked behind the scenes with elite athletes like Serena Williams and billionaire investors like Ray Dalio. So when he is on stage, it isn't random yelling. It is a highly calibrated behavioral algorithm playing out in real time.
Which perfectly explains why our comment boards have been absolutely blowing up lately.
Oh, I'm sure they have.
Yeah, because the sheer physical output defies logic. People are asking how a man who is nearly 70 years old bounces around arenas for 12 hours a day, commanding the attention of millions without losing a single step.
Well, the skepticism is completely valid. It is very easy to look at that massive kinetic energy and dismiss him as, another chicken soup for the soul guru selling manufactured hype.
Exactly. That's the stereotype.
Right. But let's look at the actual application of his work. During the 2008 financial crisis, when Wall Street was actively collapsing, he was brought in to rebuild the shattered psychology of some of the world's most powerful financial titans.
Oh.
Yeah, you don't bring a hype man into a room of panicked billionaires. You bring in someone who is fiercely rational, someone who understands the rigid architecture of human decision-making under extreme stress.
And that is exactly why we are skipping the fluff today. We are deconstructing Tony Robbins. We are going to trace the exact mechanics of how he went from being a starving building janitor to the ultimate billionaire whisperer.
More importantly, we're going to use his life's work to tackle the ultimate modern anxiety, the baseline question keeping so many people awake at night. What actually is fulfillment?
So today's exploration is officially titled Success versus Fulfillment, the only metric that actually matters. Grab your drink, get comfortable, and let's get right into it.
Cheers to that. So to understand the psychological tools he eventually built, you really have to understand the environment that forced him to invent those tools in the first place.
Right, the origin story.
Exactly. We are jumping back to 1960 California. But you need to strip away the image of the glamorous post-war sunny suburbs. He was born into severe poverty and immense household chaos.
Yeah, the reality of his childhood was incredibly heavy.
Very heavy.
His mother was highly unstable, both physically and emotionally abusive. And because of that severe vacuum of adult stability, he was basically forced into the role of the caretaker.
Right, he was the peacekeeper for his younger siblings.
Exactly. He was a child constantly trying to de-escalate violent adult situations.
And think about what that does to a developing nervous system. A child in that environment is flooded with chronic stress hormones.
Constantly in fight or flight.
Right. The brain maps the external world as inherently dangerous. By the time he was 17, the toxicity reached a breaking point, and he walked out the door with nothing but the clothes on his back.
Literally nothing.
0 college prospects. He took a job as a janitor just to physically survive.
Let's view this through a tech scene analogy because I think it helps frame it. If childhood is the foundational programming phase of a human being, his base code was entirely corrupted by trauma.
That is a great way to put it.
And historically, when a system's foundational code is that compromised, the system just crashes. People repeat the cycles of abuse, or they self-medicate, or they just break. So how did he actually recompile that broken code into massive global success?
Well, the turning point was an intersection of mentorship and neuroscience. He found a mentor in Jim Rohn, but the true mechanical shift came when he discovered neurolinguistic programming, or NLP.
Right, NLP.
He used those concepts to rapidly alter his trajectory, becoming a millionaire in his 20s. But we need to look at how it actually worked. He stopped treating the mind as an abstract, mystical entity.
Oh, this is the hardware versus software concept.
Exactly. He approached the physical body as hardware and emotions as software. He called this framework state management.
But I have to challenge this premise a bit. Isn't state management just like a temporary physiological high? I mean, you can't outbreathe a fundamentally broken life or deep-rooted trauma just by standing up straight, right?
That is a crucial distinction to make. State management isn't the final solution. It's the gateway to the solution.
Okay, walk me through that.
When a person is depressed or terrified, their physiology mirrors that software. Shoulders collapse, breathing becomes shallow, cortisol levels spike, and the amygdala takes over.
The fear center of the brain.
Right. In that biological state, the prefrontal cortex, which handles logical strategy, literally shuts down. You cannot logic your way out of a cortisol spike.
Oh, so you have to change the hardware state to reboot the system before you can even attempt to fix the software glitch.
Precisely the mechanism. He realized that by radically and aggressively changing his physiology, shifting his posture, deepening his breathing, or partaking in extreme physical disruptions like firewalking, he could instantly alter his blood chemistry.
Wait, so the firewalk isn't just a party trick?
Not at all. A firewalk isn't magic. It is a massive spike in adrenaline that forces the brain to realize, I am physically doing something I thought was impossible. It creates a brief window of neuroplasticity where old trauma responses can be overwritten.
Wow.
And this leads directly to his core thesis, decision versus condition.
Meaning your external conditions don't actually compile the final output of your life? Your internal decisions do?
Yes, but you can only make a high-quality decision when you are in a high-quality physiological state.
That makes so much sense.
Right. If you are operating out of fear, your decisions will merely be survival mechanisms. The goal is to manage the physical state so you can make decisions that actually alter your destiny.
Okay, let's test that theory against the real world because it brings up a really uncomfortable question.
Go for it.
If altering your life requires making a firm decision from a strong physiological state, why do so many people refuse to do it?
That is the million-dollar question.
Right. Like, we all know people who stay paralyzed in jobs they despise, or relationships that actively drain them, or just a general baseline of misery. What is keeping them frozen?
Well, that paradox brings us to his concept of the emotional home.
The emotional home.
Okay. We all possess a default emotional baseline, usually constructed during our teenage years. And the unsettling truth is that an emotional home does not have to be a happy or healthy place.
Wait, you are saying people can build an emotional home entirely out of anxiety or anger or sadness?
It happens constantly. If your foundational years were chaotic and stressful, your brain associates chaos with the concept of normal.
Oh, wow.
Even if the feeling is deeply negative, like chronic insecurity, or that classic imposter syndrome we see so often, the nervous system violently craves the familiarity of it. Leaving that negative state actually feels like a biological threat to the brain.
So happiness, to a brain wired for chaos, feels incredibly unsafe because it is unpredictable.
Exactly. It feels like a betrayal to the brain's baseline.
Okay. Everyone listening right now, I want you to mentally audit your own lives for a second. Examine your own emotional home. Are you secretly addicted to the cortisol rush of being constantly overwhelmed? Do you subconsciously pick a fight on a peaceful weekend because your brain is screaming for the familiarity of a crisis?
It is a profound audit to undertake, because once we establish that toxic emotional home, we write limiting scripts to justify staying there.
Like telling ourselves, I'm just a naturally anxious person.
Or, I'm just not cut out for leadership. To break that pattern, you have to consciously observe the script while it is running and deliberately force a new physical and emotional experience to rewire that specific neural pathway.
You literally have to catch yourself in the act of storytelling. But why do we write those specific stories in the first place? What is the underlying motivation driving us to stay in those emotional homes?
To answer that, he mapped out the 6 human needs, which basically act as the underlying operating system for all human behavior.
Okay, lay them out for us.
The first 4 are the needs of the personality: certainty, uncertainty or variety, significance and connection or love. The final 2 are the needs of the spirit: growth and contribution.
Okay, certainty makes perfect sense from an evolutionary standpoint. We need a roof over our heads. We need to know we won't starve. But uncertainty.
Well, the brain requires novelty to stay engaged. If you know exactly what is going to happen every second of every day, you become completely numb. We need challenges to feel alive.
Right, that makes sense.
But significance is often the most dangerous need on the board. Everyone possesses a deep psychological hunger to feel unique, important, and needed.
And I imagine people can hack that need for significance in highly destructive ways.
Oh, absolutely.
Like tearing someone down in a comment section gives you an instant hit of significance. You exerted power over someone else, so for 3 seconds you feel important.
That is the exact mechanism. Every destructive behavior is simply a poorly coded attempt to meet one of these 6 needs. If someone uses violence to intimidate another person, they gain instant certainty that the person will comply and instant significance because they're in control.
So the needs are met, but the method destroys their life and the lives of others.
Precisely. The objective is to transition from meeting these needs through toxic patterns to meeting them through growth and contribution. He formalized this approach with the concept of CANI, spelled C-A-N-I, which stands for constant and never-ending improvement.
It's like an ongoing operating system update for the soul. If you are consistently growing your own capabilities and consistently contributing to others, you meet your needs sustainably. You don't require the toxic shortcuts anymore.
Exactly. Now, let's actually pull that concept of significance and apply it directly to the most pressing external threat in the modern workforce.
Oh, I know where this is going.
The rapid advancement of artificial intelligence.
The timing on that is perfect because AI is no longer just a fascinating tech advancement. It is actively threatening the foundation of both blue-collar and white-collar sectors.
It is everywhere.
Yeah, everything from complex coding to copywriting to data analysis is suddenly vulnerable. The tech scene is in a state of absolute whiplash.
And if we examine this through the lens of those 6 needs, the genuine terror surrounding artificial intelligence isn't merely about losing an income stream. It is a profound, devastating loss of identity and dignity.
Because we tie our worth to our jobs.
Exactly. For generations, society has falsely equated work output with self-worth. We have attached our entire sense of significance to our job titles and our ability to produce mechanical results.
So when a generative model can execute your 40-hour workweek task in 4 seconds, your primary source of significance just vanishes. The brain interprets that not just as an economic shift, but as an existential death.
That is the core of the AI panic,
Right.
which highlights the urgent necessity for a cultural shift. We have to decouple our meaning from mechanical production. We must move our source of identity toward the traits AI fundamentally lacks: nuanced wisdom, deep human creativity, and profound generosity.
You know, the American tech scene has a specific perspective floating around right now that aligns perfectly with this psychological shift.
What's that?
The fear that AI will replace you is slightly misplaced. You will not be replaced by an AI. You will be replaced by a human who has learned how to direct and utilize AI.
I completely agree with that. And that perspective is entirely validated by his emphasis on pattern recognition. He argues that the speed of learning and the ability to recognize macro patterns are the ultimate modern survival skills.
So it's about seeing the big picture.
Right. If you view AI as an unprecedented monster, you are operating from the amygdala, pure fear. But if you step back and recognize the historical patterns of technological shifts, from the Industrial Revolution replacing physical labor to spreadsheets replacing manual accounting, the fear begins to dissipate.
Because we've been here before.
Exactly. The historical data shows that technology destroys tasks, but it creates entirely new categories of industries.
There is a quote of his that perfectly encapsulates that. Fear comes from, quote, "This has never happened before." But the moment you recognize it has happened before, just in a different context, you regain your cognitive bandwidth. You shift from being a victim of the condition to being the decision maker.
You step out of the fear response and move back into the prefrontal cortex where you can actually adapt.
All right, so if we successfully navigate the AI wave, update our skills, and secure our income, that brings us to the next massive pillar of his framework, the algorithm of wealth.
Yes.
Because surviving is one thing, but he actively teaches massive wealth generation. Yet he simultaneously warns that wealth alone is a terrible defense against misery.
This is where the financial mechanics require a fundamental shift in personal identity. Wealth generation begins with moving from being a consumer to being an owner.
Meaning you aren't just standing in line to buy the newest piece of tech, you are aggressively seeking to hold equity in the company that manufactures it.
True wealth is built on holding equity in assets, not just acquiring depreciating products. He outlines 3 investment principles to navigate this transition.
Let's break those down.
First, capital preservation. That is an intense focus on not losing the money you already have. Second, asset allocation. This means distributing your investments across different vehicles so that a crash in one sector doesn't wipe out your entire portfolio.
And the third principle is finding asymmetrical risk-reward. For anyone not spending their weekends reading finance journals, how does that actually work in practice?
To put it simply, most people assume investing requires taking massive, dangerous risks. Billionaires do the exact opposite. They structure their investments so the downside is strictly capped, but the upside is completely unlimited.
So they protect their base.
Right. They look for scenarios where they risk $1 to potentially make $5 rather than risking $5 to make 1. Later in his career, he wrote extensively on these specific strategies, interviewing the top financial minds to decode their playbooks for the everyday person.
Which is incredibly valuable.
It is. And dropping a quick casual disclaimer right here, we are not financial advisors. We're simply exploring the objective data and frameworks he compiled.
Always necessary to have the disclaimer on the record, but I want to connect this financial algorithm back to the human element. Think about the Wall Street executives you mentioned at the start of our conversation. The titans navigating the 2008 crash. They deeply understood asset allocation. They were the masters of asymmetrical risk. They possessed billions of dollars. And yet, many of them were clinically depressed, and some were suicidal.
Yes.
If they had the algorithm perfectly executed, why did the system crash?
Because they confused the algorithm of wealth with the art of human fulfillment. His core philosophy addresses this paradox perfectly. Achievement is a science.
A science, meaning it's predictable.
Exactly. There are strict, measurable, absolute rules to getting rich. If you follow the algorithm of capital preservation and compound interest, you will generate wealth. But fulfillment is an art form. It is highly subjective, completely unquantifiable, and it requires entirely different psychological metrics.
So mastering the science of achievement guarantees absolutely nothing about your quality of life.
Not a single thing, which led to the defining conclusion he delivered to those Wall Street executives and to everyone he counsels. Success without fulfillment is the ultimate failure.
Wow. Success without fulfillment is failure.
You can purchase all the certainty and significance the world has to offer. But if you are not experiencing growth, and critically, if you are not engaging in contribution, your spirit will slowly starve to death. He constantly reiterates that progress equals happiness.
That makes his massive shift toward philanthropy make total sense. He launched the 1 Billion Meals Project with Feeding America. When you look at the mechanics we just discussed, that project isn't just a PR move. It is him actively managing his own psychology by fulfilling that final human need.
It is the practical application of his own framework. He asserts that the ultimate meaning of life is giving. There's a profound neurological shift that happens when you transcend your own survival needs to provide for others.
Because it breaks the scarcity mindset.
Right. A brain obsessed with its own problems is operating in scarcity. The physical act of giving forcefully interrupts that scarcity loop, signaling to the nervous system that you have more than enough. It locks in a level of fulfillment that no market crash and no technological shift can ever strip away.
It really redefines the entire pursuit. We spend our lives relentlessly optimizing our daily routines to achieve success, but if we aren't simultaneously optimizing for fulfillment, we're just running a marathon in the wrong direction. You climb the entire ladder only to realize it is leaning against the wrong wall.
That is the exact trap of modern ambition.
As we bring today's conversation to a close, I think it is crucial to step back and frame how we approach these massive figures and complex theories.
Absolutely. Our objective wrap-up is always about clarity of purpose. Today's exploration was focused purely on sharing facts, psychological frameworks, and historical data regarding human behavior.
Right.
We aren't here to blindly endorse, criticize, or discriminate against any country, group, demographic, or individual philosophy. The core value of this show is to encourage independent, critical thinking in an increasingly complicated world. We present the frameworks so you can test them, analyze the data, and decide what is actually useful for your own life. Stay smart, stay critical.
Stay smart, stay critical. I love that. So, I want to leave you all with a final provocative thought to mull over before we go. We talked extensively today about how the brain writes internal scripts to keep you safely locked in a familiar emotional home, even if that home is miserable.
Yes, the bad base code.
Right. So what is one limiting story you are currently telling yourself? Maybe it's a story about your ceiling in your career, your worthiness in a relationship, or your ability to adapt to this new AI-driven landscape. Identify that specific story today and ask yourself, what would happen if you actively chose to rewrite the base code right now?
That is the exact question that initiates the algorithm of change.
Truly. Thank you so much for spending your time with us, Sip and Talkers. If you enjoyed this conversation and want to keep updating your own mental frameworks, please hit that subscribe button to the Sip and Talk podcast so you never miss a discussion.
And before we sign off, we want to give a quick warm shout out to our good friend Mickey.
Absolutely. You have to go check out his YouTube channel, Mickey to Life. He just dropped his latest travel vlog, and his adventures around the globe are always incredible. Head over to Mickey to Life and show him some love.
Always a great time watching his updates. Thanks for listening, everyone.
See you next episode.
See you next episode.